Perched in a tree, the hero says he can change his occupation whenever he wants. He leaps down onto an upright, armored wolf wielding a spear and strikes it. The hero notes that this is the story of a unique jack-of-all-trades advancing his career. Clutching a sword, the character charges into a fierce fight with a pack of wolves. Magic flared in his hands as blue and orange clouds twisted into a single vortex that pushed back the attackers. When he says his name, Tukasa Amashiki, he casts a spell that is likely fire-based. The hero walks down the hall of an office building in a business suit and thinks his first appearance at a company earning 300 billion a year should be impressive. Moving on, he says the main hall really shapes the company's first impression. It's like a corridor, and the neater everything looks, the more you sense the importance of the people who work there. The character straightens his tie and says he is a job hopper, someone who has worked for many different companies. The hero approaches the receptionist and tells her he has a final interview to attend and that his last name is Amashiki, thinking the term job hopper just means waiting for the right opportunity and sharpening his skills. Tsukasa rides the elevator, sees his reflection, and thinks the company he has a contract with is an important step, but its opportunities for growth have diminished despite its size. In the elevator with the receptionist, he smiles, fixes his hair, and thinks everything is going well. At his new job, he has passed almost all the selection stages and reached the final interview. Looking back, the character realizes the selection process was very hard and remembers his rivals and the people who ran his tests. He sits in front of the office door, watching the girl and thinking only the final interview remains before completing his transition to a new job, ready for any questions, though sensing things might not go as planned. The girl with the folder calls his name and points to the door. Amasaki gathers his thoughts, stands, and answers her. Preparing for the interview, the hero thinks his past experience will help and that this large company will bring him success. Asking permission, he steps over the threshold, believing he is entering an office. After leaving the room, the character steps into an open area surrounded by an endless field, completely alone as clouds drift slowly over the distant horizon, and he is deeply surprised. Tsukasa thinks he entered the wrong room by mistake, and he remembers that large companies often have break rooms where employees can relax during their free time. He realizes he's in one of the rooms, turns around, and finds there is no door back and the space beyond is just an endless field. Surprised, the hero looks around again and realizes he has somehow ended up somewhere completely unfamiliar. Panicking, the hero clutches his head and screams that he does not know where he is or what this place is, tormented by fears about what will happen at his final interview. Running his hands over his face, he feels his skin soften, checks his phone, sees himself as he did at 18, and realizes he has become younger. Amasaki keeps his spirits up, telling himself that with this experience at his young age, any company would be happy to hire him. Realizing this is not the time to think about it, he looks around again and wonders whether places like this exist in Japan and whether he really is in Japan. Exploring the local plants, the hero touches them and says he's never seen anything like them before. Small, free-floating balls with wings fly past him. They frighten him, and he says he's never seen creatures like these. Surrounded by dense thickets of unfamiliar plants, the character looks around. The hero wonders if he has ended up in a completely different world. Remembering the hitman technique from games and anime, he now finds it natural to think about it, and at that moment, he finds something in the breast pocket of his jacket. The card reads Amasaki status. It reads Quadrupoldi. The character looks puzzled. The words make no sense to him. He hadn't seen the card before. While trying to recall the usual Iseki items, the menu, the team, and the status, he realizes something. The hero realizes the status card describes him, but he cannot believe his abilities could actually be shown as numbers in real life. Convinced his magical powers are outstanding and keeping fit with sports, he is still just a simple office worker when a system window pops up showing the jack of all trades specialization, and the hero watches it in surprise. The hero studies the various system windows. Surprised by how many attributes there are, he realizes his specialization lets him switch skills at will. The amount of magic spent depends on the chosen profession. Mashiki suspects this specialization may be a unique skill he gained by changing jobs many times, and he also wants to know why the interview location is connected to another world. The hero sits on the grass, remembering that there were others in line for the interview, and waits for them or for instructions, but neither comes. Amasaki realized that if his water supply ran out, the situation would be hopeless, and he could not just leave things as they were, so he knew he had to act. Confidently moving forward, he thinks humility does not suit him and believes anything can be overcome by taking action, so you need to approach the problem with a positive attitude. Amaseki spots a giant winged creature with crooked paws, a strange mix of dragon and praying mantis in the clearing ahead. The monster notices him and charges after him. Running at full speed, the hero realizes the situation has changed and that even at his fastest he cannot save them, and he thinks it should not have come to this. Suddenly frozen in place, he holds his hand out and gestures for the creature to stop and talk. Nearby, a giant tree beside the character was felled by the monster as it charged through, crushing and destroying everything in its path. The hero was left terrified but miraculously unharmed because the praying mantis did not touch him. Mishap realizes his efforts so far are useless as a huge insect slowly approaches, posing a new threat. Convinced he'll die if he stays, he has to find something and realizes anything around him can be used as a weapon. A system window pops up reminding him his specialty is jack of all trades. Remembering his status card tucked in his jacket, he pulls it out, chooses the magician's specialization, and shouts it at the top of his lungs. Amaseki stands amid strange magical patterns, feeling new knowledge and experience flowing into him as magic fills him, realizing this is the world's magic. The hero forms a ball of fire with his hands, screams, and sends it toward the enemy. He sends a fireball at the insect-like monster that has been chasing him. Surprised, they slowly lower their hands as the creature, engulfed in flames, breaks into pieces and finally burns away to ash. Amaseki drained both physically and emotionally. He looks at the ashes, raises his hand, and celebrates his victory. Beads of sweat drip slowly from his body. Staring at his hands, the hero realizes that after switching jobs he began to see magic, and suspects it is the jack-of-all-trades power given to him. Surprised, he hears a cheerful tone. He takes it to mean his level has increased as he expected. It really feels like some kind of game. He checks his status card again. Amaseki looks back at what remains of the enemy, and now disagrees with his earlier thoughts. He stares at his hands and decides the only thing that could be like a game here is the system, and he realizes he can still feel the flow of magic, though it used to give him headaches. The character believes that underestimating the situation and treating it like a game is a direct path to fatal consequences, and that everything that happens to him is not a joke. Standing up confidently, he shouts that he will build his career, work for large companies, and strive for a better life. The hero sees a career as something made to climb the social ladder in modern Japan, in a world of magic and swords where monsters roam, and he knows it will be useless to him. A system window pops up, telling you your character has reached level 2. Amaseki drops to his knees, closes his eyes, and says he still has a chance to rebuild his career. He explains that the power of a jack of all trades is the ability to switch between any profession, and the recent battle showed how powerful that ability is. Raising his level will give him superiority wherever he is. Confidently, the hero stands up, straightens his clothes, leaves, and decides to hone his skills in every profession in the world. A man from Michigan forms a ball of water above his hand, grateful that magic means he no longer has to worry about water, and he thinks about where to sleep, but definitely not outside. The hero realizes he needs clothes, food, and shelter, all basic needs. First, he needs to find a village. The character considers changing his activity, opens the status window, and notes he might be able to choose a suitable profession there. A system window shows a magic point counter. The hero figures he spent 20 points to switch his specialty and 10 on a fireball for the battle. Energy slowly regenerates, so he can use his powers fairly often. Amaseki discovers the hunter specialization on his card and feels pleased. This specialization sharpens his senses and makes finding what he needs more likely. He sniffs and listens to the ground, then lies down. These actions let him pick out tracks in the grass. The hero spots blood on the leaves and judges it about 2 days old, sees some tracks are human and others are wolf, signs of a battle or a hunt, and is sure that following those tracks will lead him to the village. Amaseki pushes through the tall grass and after a while reaches the village, which is surrounded by a fence and has smoke rising from the houses. Noticing it is more a village than a hamlet, the hero dismisses that detail, knows people are there and never imagined he would be so happy to see them. Then he becomes a magician again, and at the gate a man with a spear meets him. Amaseki straightens his suit and tie and greets the guards cheerfully. The hero tells the guard he is being watched like a suspect and asks for an explanation. The guard remarks that the nearby characters are very strange and asks where he is from. Introducing himself as Tsukasa Amaseki, he says it might be more accurate to call him a traveling mage. The man with the gun is surprised by the hero's specialization and says someone with a regular job couldn't have made it here because it's too far, and Amaseki looks back, surprised. The hero doesn't understand the work instruction, and the village guard asks him to show his status badge. A mashiki pulls a card from his pocket and hands it to the guard, noting it is an odd way to prove his abilities, and the guard, surprised to find a mage, apologizes and says it is not something he encounters often. Cheerfully, he explains that human craftsmen usually work for nations or nobles or become adventurers in big cities, and rarely do petty jobs in remote areas. The hero says he understands and accepts the guard's skepticism. The guard explains that masters go where they can make the most of their abilities and get paid. Amashiki says he honed his magic in the mountains, but grew to miss living among humans and kept some details to himself, and the guard understands and says it is not surprising that the hero lacks intelligence. The character says he's been called a fool. The man with the spear looks embarrassed and silent, then calls him by his full name. The hero replies that he can just call him Tsukasa. The guard asks Tsukasa for a favor and pulls him aside for a minute. When the hero asks where to go, the guard says he wants to discuss everything in detail at the village head's house. Standing beside a large wooden house, the guard calls the village head and asks him to come over for a moment. The chief showed no surprise about the card called Zozo and replied that a jack of all trades had now appeared in their village. Delighted, the elder asks Zozo again if this is true. The guard says he checked the hero's status and confirms the hero is a magician. Amasaki asks in bewilderment off to the side. The village head straightens his clothes and introduces himself as Esta. The hero is glad to meet him, introduces himself, says that Zozo wanted to ask him for something, and hands over his status card. The headman explains the hero's task and says that silver wolf monsters have appeared near the village. Realizing the tracks in the forest belong to those wolves, the hero now has the full picture. The village chief says they could have managed on their own if there were fewer wolves, so they asked Mr. Tsukasa to defeat them. He asks if there are any more jacks of all trades and is told only villagers remain, so the hero realizes they are even rarer than he had thought. Ismerks believes this place faces constant monster attacks, so the risk is very high, but there is also demand for combat-related professions. Tsukasa asks to hear more about the silver wolves, and the village chief and the guard are very pleased. Esther and Zozo describe these wolves as silver-furred monsters with sharp claws and fangs. They move quickly and have an excellent sense of smell. All adventurers rate their danger level as nearly the lowest. The village head tells the hero the villagers can defeat the wolves if they all work together, but the village is small, and everyone already works hard to survive. The elder warns that if anyone is injured fighting these creatures, they will be unable to work, and those remaining in the settlement will need protection, and the hero realizes the monsters are preventing the evacuation. Esther and Zozo press the character to fulfill their request, promising he will be well paid and begging him to help. The hero realizes he has fought monsters before, so deciding will be easier. Tsukasa also remembers deciding to pursue his career in this world, so he will do whatever benefits him and readily accepts the offer. Esther and Zozo are very happy about this. They thank Hardly and pat him on the back. Tsukasa tells them not to thank him yet because he hasn't started working. Zozo shouts his thanks anyway. Hardly thinks they're naive villagers. I'm a sickie who knows nothing about this world, with no income, shelter, or food, and since Zozo and Esta will now take care of me, it's best to begin by arranging payment for them as they are the first people I met here. The hero says he must hurry, but then pauses to ask if his new acquaintances could spare him something to eat before he starts work. Tsukasa fears they will have no food either and believes it cannot be fixed. Still, he gets some food, thanks SD and Zozo for the meal, goes outside, notes his stomach is full and that he has comfortable clothes to move in, and at first plans to return to the tracks he saw a little earlier. Wearing a new, beautiful cloak, the hero stands in a clearing, surprised by so many unfamiliar plants and curious about their names and how the world's inhabitants use them. Remembering his status, the hero goes to check the list of professions. He learns about the praiser profession, a job that lets you determine the value of anything, and when used on a person it reveals their status, though the completeness of the information depends on the profession's level. Using this profession, he discovers nearby plants, including the zuru, a powerful healing herb for cuts, burns, and making medicines and potions, and he thinks selling it could earn him some money. Collecting the herbs, the hero recalls a pharmacist and an alchemist on the professions list, and thinks making his own medicines and potions later would be useful and open up new possibilities. The hero finds a Falsto zuru, and because of his abilities it tastes awful and causes stomach pain, so Tsukasa is surprised and says it is very dangerous, and that without those skills he would have collected the false grass. His ability is extremely useful even in a world without the internet, because he can, as if by magic, pull perfectly accurate information from the depths of consciousness. Tsukasa thinks there are quirks to changing professions and compares it to games where you level up in one job then switch, so he did not lose his magician skills after becoming an appraiser. The hero explains that the master's skills build up over time. At that moment, the master forms a stone point from nothing with his fingers while saying the name of the object he wants. Tsukasa is surprised the tip came out smaller than he expected, but takes it seriously. Suddenly, his creation rushes into the air at a tremendous speed he did not expect, and the hero watches it, dumbfounded. Suddenly, he feels his magic drain and collapses, revealing his status, and he sees he spent 50 magic points at 550 trying to create a spearhead that flies away. Lying on the ground, the hero is annoyed and realizes that using magic without being a mage is extremely ineffective. Tsukasa lies on his back to regain his energy, thinking that skills suited to his current profession will be the most effective, otherwise a job's unique aspects would be meaningless. Being able to use magic as a swordsman and a sword as a mage is still valuable even with low strength, and the hero finds it useful for surprise attacks because the benefits outweigh the high strength cost. Lying on the grass, Tsukasa keeps thinking that with his current magic points he won't be able to do anything, and to use his power properly, he would need to level up and fully recover. Resting, the hero hears an animal's footsteps beside him and listens wearily. Standing up and hiding in the bushes, he catches a faint animal scent beside him and wonders if it is a silver wolf. Tsukasa realizes the animal in front of him is a silver wolf, and he notices they are walking right beside the settlement he was just in. A system window pops up showing the silver wolf's stats. He sees that, as expected, the wolves are still below his level, so he can escape if a fight breaks out. Amashiki focuses and comes up with a plan that should work. Shouting the job change spell, he becomes a mage again. A glow surrounds him as stone projectiles form. The hero kneels, fires the newly formed stone blade, and casts another spell. The blow from the tip strikes the wolves directly. They did not expect the attack, and one of them manages to dodge. Tsukasa notices and is surprised he missed. An angry wolf glares at the hero and lunges forward to attack the master. The character casts the spell to form another stone spike and aims it directly at the last wolf. The wolf lands a hit on the hero, but at that moment the stone tip fires out, knocking the hero back as the animal falls backward right beside him while Tsukasa watches closely. After the hard fight, the character checks the defeated wolf by touching him with a finger to see if he is alive, and when the wolf does not react, he calmly sits down and exhales. Pleasant music reaches Tsukasa again from an unknown source, and he realizes his stats have improved, and his maximum magic power has risen again, though none of it feels real. The hero rises to his feet, relieved to have finally leveled up. Hearing animals approaching, he realizes the rest of the wolf pack will likely come for him, so he postpones trying the tactic of constantly changing jobs and prepares for battle. After defeating the last wolves, the hero says he will force them all to invest in his career. After a tough battle, Tsukasa remembered Zosa telling him when he left the village that the silver wolf's claws would be proof of his victory, so he must not forget to take them. Gripping a claw taken from one of the wolves, the hero studies it closely, wondering what kind of creature this silver wolf is, then regards his fallen opponent with trepidation. He sees the wolf's determination to attack him as highly unusual. This is a matter of life and death, something unthinkable in modern Japan. To survive here, he must sharpen his job-hopping skills. He also had something else on his mind. At his last level up, while checking his status card, he noticed his stats were increasing. Noticing his largest gains were in magic and intelligence, the hero attributes them to defeating monsters as a mage, saying that if he had used a sword other abilities would have improved, and Tsukasa now senses new enemies approaching. The character spots a pack emerging from the bushes, realizes there are more animals, and that the first three are the leaders, and the wolves growl aggressively as they rush toward the hero. Tsukasa unleashes sparkling spells on enemies who appear suddenly, like a predator waiting, fully prepared for the fight. Stone missiles fly from his hands again with astonishing skill as the hero steers them toward the charging wolves. Projectiles hit in quick succession, but the three strongest wolves skillfully dodge the deadly blows, showing their agility and dexterity. Shells begin to hit the pack leaders, but that does not stop them, and they quickly rush toward Tsukasa. Realizing the wolves are more agile than he is, he struggles to cope but still lands precise strikes on his targets, showing his mastery. The hero realizes his shells barely touch the animals, and he fears he will never defeat the silver wolves that way. Still, the beasts hit by the shells fall one after another, flying past Tsukasa with their paws raised. The hero looks at a fallen opponent and realizes his projectiles now pass through and mortally wound the silver wolves because his magical power has increased. Silver wolves rush toward the character, continuing to attack as they close in. Tsukasa dodges the blows and realizes he won't have time to use magic at such close range. The hero decides to change jobs and in the heat of battle switches to the swordsman specialization while shouting a spell, taking up a new weapon, a sword with a curved handle. Tsukasa fights confidently with his new weapon, expertly taking down his opponents. His new specialization gives him extra strength in his hands. He notices the monsters move much slower now and thinks it's because he's become a swordsman, so he keeps striking the wolves one after another. Facing another wave of enemies, the hero exhales, fights, and hears the pleasant sound again. A glance at his status card shows his attack and agility have improved just as he expected. Kasa believes each job boosts specific stats, letting him control which stats he improves. Seeing this as a great discovery, the character will need to experiment more with the stats after deciding on each one. Sounds from the seemingly calm forest catch the hero's attention. He quickly reaches for his sword, ready to draw it at any moment. Tsukasa looks around and realizes it's been almost an hour since the battle ended and no more monsters have appeared. He decides that going deeper into the forest and risking the pack's attention is not a good idea. The hero counts the wolves' claws he has collected and realizes he has already defeated 13 of them. He believes he has significantly reduced their numbers. The character walks across the clearing, spots one of the defeated opponents, and realizes he has returned to a place where he already fought. Tsukasa studies the fallen beast and says he thought the wolves' remains would vanish right after the fight, but now he sees the fur is in surprisingly good condition, and Zozo mentioned that the symbol of victory is the claws. Remembering his appraisal specialty, he uses it again as system windows open with evaluations of each wolf part, noting the pelt is warm and soft to the touch and good for clothing and blankets, and the meat is heavy but rich in flavor. Realizing this could be useful, the hero refuses to neglect his abilities and casts a telekinesis spell to lift the defeated enemies into the air, taking them with him. Tsukasa decides to bring all the wolves to the village. If he were a hunter, he figures he could butcher them himself, but he thinks he's had enough for today. The hero exhales. He leaves the task of cutting up the meat to the villagers, uses magic to take the animals with him, and heads toward the village. From a distance, the villagers spot the bodies of silver wolves and raise the alarm, shouting in panic that silver wolves are heading their way. A huge ball of wool comes toward the settlers from the forest. They grab their weapons in panic. The village chief faints, and everyone says they have never seen such a monster. Villagers cautiously approach the wolf skins with their weapons in hand. A guard peeks inside, sees Tukasa's tired face, and is frightened. Dropping all the animals at once, the hero exhales wearily and announces he has finally arrived, frightening the locals who still do not understand what is happening, and they flee in all directions. Recognizing Tsukasa, Zazu cries out at him in fear, points at the wolfskins, and asks what they are. Facing the surprise in the garden, the hero turns and realizes what he is being asked, then replies that a silver wolf stands beside him as the carcass hangs in the air and spins. Fearful, Zozo asks why the wolf is floating in the air. The character explains it is telekinesis, and Zozo then asks how unusual it is to see magic in this area. Tsukasa tells the villagers he thought the wolf carcasses might be useful, so he brought them to the village. Zozo is surprised the hero managed to carry them all by himself. The village chief rushes to the hero and joyfully announces that Tsukasa has returned alive. The hero hands the chief a bag as proof of his hunt and says he brought the claws of 11 wolves, though he actually defeated 13. He tells the villagers he searched the area and found no more wolves, so he concludes he destroyed the whole pack. The villagers listen, spellbound, then begin to rejoice, hugging and congratulating each other. Confused, the hero watches the villagers celebrate, realizes the village has no protector and must have been very worried, and feels his level has risen after learning a lot, so today was a productive day. Tsukasa hugs Zozo happily and says loudly that now the whole village is even more dead, while the hero feels a little embarrassed. As the guard shakes him by the shoulders, the hero says he's just doing his job and there's no need to thank him. The village chief replies that even so, they owe him their lives. Zozo and Esta accept the bag of silver wolf claws and bow to the hero for the work he has done. Tsukasa thinks he is offering his services for a reward, but he did not expect the villagers to thank him so much. Esta and Zozo invite him to the square. This situation reminds the hero of when he made a deal with a big company, and he remembers two men in suits who assumed he was a typical university graduate who thought everything was simple. People in suits are whispering. The hero realizes he'll have to do everything himself again and play the hero. X and Y said they didn't like it, and he's ready to bet there won't be a next time. Tsukasa still remembers his ordinary life, and believes it was all just jealousy and misunderstandings among colleagues, even though he thought it was normal back then. The hero realizes he can no longer stand the settlement's comfortable atmosphere, loses his temper, and suggests changing the subject. The character pointed to one of the defeated animals and asked the villagers to butcher the silver wolves. Zozo agrees to this and asks for the job because they are perfect for it. The hero thinks the atmosphere has finally changed the way he wanted. The men start cutting up the meat, and the village chief approaches Tsukasa to ask what he plans to do with the materials next. Tsukasa says he'll sell the wool and leave the meat for the villagers, and the chief thanks him, calling the meat a rare delicacy. Meanwhile, they set a pot over the fire to heat and cook the meat they caught. Estes tells the villagers to bring everything they have, and they happily bring out plates of vegetables, bottles, and other food. The village headman also calls for everyone to bring out their alcohol. One by one, villagers pour their drinks into a single large barrel, and the village head says they can drink today without fear. Sitting on the porch of one of the houses beside a child, the hero watches people having fun, peeling vegetables and preparing dishes, someone drinking from a barrel and others setting the tables, and he thinks it has turned into a real holiday. Tsukasa falls sideways and almost loses consciousness. The child beside him is stunned. The village chief notices and runs to the protagonist, calling his name. When Estha asks what happened, the character apologizes, says he just needs to rest, and adds he would stay in their village if he could, and the elder agrees and apologizes for not suggesting it sooner. The village chief escorts the hero to the chief's house and shows him where to lie down. Only when the hero reaches the bed does he throw himself onto it with all his strength. After removing his armor, Tsukasa lies on his bed, thinking about how to start over in this new world. He plans to use the village as a base to hunt more monsters, level up, and explore the world because he knows too little about it. The celebration of the victory over the wolves continues outside. Blinded by the sunlight, the hero is surprised it's still light outside, and thinking night has not yet come, turns away from the windows to shut out the light. Tsukasa thinks about nearly falling asleep, assumes this world has no night, and buries his face in his pillow. The village chief knocks and asks if the hero is awake, so the hero gets dressed and opens the door, and the chief says Tsukasa was fast asleep and they did not want to wake him. The hero thanks them for their consideration. The village chief says such a dream is not surprising after Tsukasa's fight with the wolf pack. He says he brought Tsukasa breakfast and offers it for him to taste. Given a tray with 2 plates of food and bread, the hero says he will not refuse the meal, since he has not eaten anything since yesterday evening, and thanks the headman for providing it. Tsukasa digs in happily, scooping spoonful after spoonful. The hero notices how the milk's gentle sweetness blends perfectly with the vegetables, even finding pieces of potatoes and carrots, and really enjoys the dish. There are also pieces of meat. He wonders whether the meat came from the monster he fought. Thinking it's beef, he feels it melt in his mouth. The hero can't imagine that such delicious meat could come from a monster. Takasa watches fat spill out when he bites, breaks off a piece of bread, and mixes it into his food. The bread pairs perfectly with the stew, just as he expected. The hero keeps scooping spoonful after spoonful. He really enjoys the food he was given. The character finds the simple dish perfect, exactly what he needed to satisfy his hunger. Behind him stands a man in a suit with his eyes hidden. The hero turns but sees no one there. After finishing his meal, Tsukasa hands the dishes back to the girl and thanks her profusely for the food she gave him. The girl blushes and takes the dishes back. The village chief calls the hero into the room, takes out a heavy bag, places it on the table, and says it is the hero's reward for defeating the wolves. Carefully, the character opens the bag and asks if Esther objects. Inside are 13 silver coins with intricate patterns. Realizing he does not know the value of the coins, the hero asks the village chief to explain their worth, and Esther agrees and begins her story. He explains that, for example, a small snack will require several of these coins, and the hero understands everything. The village chief explains the local exchange rate. An iron coin is 10 yen, a copper coin is 100, a silver coin is 1,000, a gold coin is 10,000, and a large gold coin is 1 million yen. After asking several clarifying questions, the hero realized he needed to look for large coins. Est says the guild pays 1 silver coin for each silver wolf, and that prices vary by region, though they follow a standard rate. The hero realized the prices in the village were normal, and Esther regretfully explains that trying to bargain would give them a bad reputation and adventurers would refuse to take their tasks. The hero believes no one would have come to the villagers' aid then. To them, it was a life-or-death matter. He imagines 2 adventurers spreading malicious rumors about the village. Tsukasa worries the villagers could easily take advantage of a man like him. Meanwhile, the village chief pulls out another bag and says it's payment for the wolf skins. The hero counts the reward and finds 50 copper coins. Stab explains they usually pay 8 coppers for the skins, but because of the character's merits they decided to adjust the payment. Tsukasa stops the village chief and says there is no problem and that he understands everything. Back home he thinks he could have bargained, but Esta was the one who helped him settle in. The hero knows money matters, but he does not want to damage his relationship with the village chief. The village chief comes to Tsukasa with another request, and the character explains that some villagers were attacked by silver wolves and need medicine, but there is not enough of God's ulegras to make it. The hero recognizes these as the herbs he gathered in the forest before the battle with the wolves. Tsukasa believes he can heal the villagers himself, but he must use the methods they trust or they will not accept it, so he takes the herbs he collected from his bag and hands them to the village chief. Esther is surprised the hero managed to gather herbs. The hero calls Tsukasa special, but Tsukasa rejects the praise and says he did nothing special. The village head says he'll take the herbs to the local pharmacist now, which surprises the hero, who didn't expect a pharmacist in the village. Esther says the girl is not really a pharmacist and has no specific profession, and the hero thinks if someone had a specific specialization, he could get new information. An old woman in baggy clothes opens the door for the heroes and asks what they need, saying she cannot help them at all without grass. Tsukasa is surprised when the pharmacist yells at them from the doorway. The village chief tells the herbalists they brought herbs, and the hero wonders whether the woman talks like that to everyone or only in this case. The heroes step into a hut filled with herbs and potions. The apothecary urges them to come in quickly. One of the heroes notices an unpleasant smell throughout the room. He wonders whether all of these are medicinal herbs. The woman extends her hand. The hero cannot tell what they want from him. She shouts for him to hand over the grass. Tsukasa nervously pulls out a bag and shakes out the Godzilla grass. The herbalist says the herb is perfect, so she'll finally make medicine for the sick, and the hero is lucky there's nothing mixed into the herbs or she'd have skinned him. Tsukasa asks the woman how she could make medicine without the proper specialization. She looks at him. The herbalist asks what the hero is mumbling, raises his voice, and says that with knowledge and skill anyone can prepare medicine. Tsukasa is dumbfounded. She tells him he doesn't have to be a chef to cook, and the same applies here. Tsukasa, confused, asks what the difference is then. Tsukasa asks the apothecary about the advantages of her trade, admits he knows little, but says it likely makes collecting and mixing ingredients more efficient, and that she knows more than she lets on. The hero understands that specialization expands and improves the knowledge he has gathered and some actions, and though he had understood the herbalist and was about to leave, she pulled him back and stopped him. The pharmacist says she needs his help making a medicine, so he will have to stay and work here. The village chief steps away and wishes Tsukasa luck. Tsukasa feels puzzled. Despite his dissatisfaction, he remains in the apothecary's house and gets to work, mixing the ingredients in a large bowl. Approaching the herbalist, the character asks if what he has prepared will work. The herbalist studies the potion and says it's not bad. She hands him a new vat and tells him to mix it now too. The hero is puzzled again but has to get to work. He had thought the apothecary only needed the herb to Zool, but he was wrong. Confused why he's doing this, Tsukasa expected to learn more about creating medicine, but instead ends up doing Sisyphean labor, and the woman tells him to move on to the next vat when she's done with this one. She yells at him to stop shirking his work. Tired, the hero decides to see if his efforts can make him more efficient. He doesn't think it's cheating. Using his magic, the character changes his specialization. The herbalist watches him, confused. Understanding the purpose of each herb, the hero now sorts them skillfully and mixes them in a vat at high speed. She notices he is getting better and better at handling herbs. Grateful, the character thanks her, remembers how he felt as a swordsman, and now finally understands how to control his body, and having figured everything out, he calls the herbalist Mrs. Jurda. The hero asks her if she's drying her herbs now. She agrees, saying it is necessary to boost the healing effect, and Tsukasa says he can do it faster and asks her for herbs, understanding that apothecaries have special skills that need to be tested. The character casts a spell that dries plants almost instantly in his hands. He hands the herbs to Gerda, who looks surprised and wary, and the herbalist tells Tsukasa that the man said he was a mage. She points out the mages don't have that spell, but the hero managed to dry the herbs so quickly. Tsukasa finds the atmosphere here very tense. His specialty is changing specializations. Tsukasa says he just switched to the apothecary job to use that skill. Gerda asks suspiciously how he managed to switch his specialization from magician to apothecary, and the hero is surprised that she finds his abilities unusual. The herbalists begin shouting that this can't be true, and one insists no one has ever heard of changing specialization and tells the hero to think for himself, while the hero finds it strange to be lectured on common sense in a world of swords and magic. Gerda tells him specialization is something people are born with and that he cannot change, and she is confident she is right. Tsukasa is very surprised because he thought this world was like a computer game where everyone could change their attributes and abilities whenever they wanted. He knows some people can increase their level of specialization, but they cannot deliberately change their skills and abilities. Even with her great experience, Goethe didn't know about his unique abilities, and he thinks his specialization is incredibly rare, possibly the only one in the world. The herbalist warns Tsukasa to be careful with such power. Tsukasa agrees and realizes he must figure out who he can trust with these skills and who he cannot. The pharmacist says his abilities would make him a very valuable assistant to her, and the hero is puzzled by the proposal. He thinks even simple help is hard, and now he is being given extra conditions he was not prepared for, admitting he was not as skilled as he first appeared. Gerda asks the hero if he accepts her proposal and what his apothecary specialization level is. Tsukasa replies he is level 1. The herbalist taps him on the nose and says this is why he needs to keep working. She tells him that even at a low level, he can make more types of medicine if he keeps learning and gaining experience, but he needs to give it his full effort. Gertie says life matters greatly in this world, and studying medicine won't hinder the hero in his endeavors. Tsukasa realizes he has nothing to argue with. The herbalist keeps handing him more herbs until his hands are full. The hero understands one important thing: the woman is a witch. In a clearing, a hare-like creature with a horn on its forehead finds what look like acorns and begins eating. Then another of the same kind sees it, and they clash with their small horns over the food. Tsukasa steps out from behind a tree in new clothes, holding a bow, shoots one of the animals and hits it in the head, while the other is frightened and runs away. Once again, the hero is happy to have gained a new level, and as he picks up the defeated animal's body, he says he has lived in the village for a week and hunts the monsters he meets in the forest every day on his way. The character says his prey are horned rabbits, whose meat is tender and juicy and an irresistible choice for the dinner table, popular with the villagers and with Tsukasa himself. Everything began when the village pharmacist Gerda started brazenly using him and risking his life, and a series of adventures and battles turned it into something he never expected. When the locals saw him by the pharmacist's house one day, they invited him to join them at the village hunting grounds, and he became interested in their offer. The villagers said they had a problem and asked Tsukasa to come with them. Thinking his hunting skills might help on the hunt, Tsukasa went with them. They searched the forest together for animals but found none, and the hero told them no one was in the area they had been searching. The hunters said they had already driven off the wolf pack and wondered if it had moved, while the hero sensed nearby small animals and monsters and thought it might be his instincts or his specialty. Lost in thought, he realized the vast knowledge his ability gave him let him understand there was another pack of animals nearby. The news terrified the hunters. Tsukasa stepped aside, saying he sensed the animals nearby and would search the forest while the hunters waited because they were counting on him, and winter was approaching. Thanks to his actions on the hunt, the hero believes he raised his level to 8 and his hunter skills to 5. He said it was getting harder to improve his level each time. After picking up the dead horned rabbit, the hero thought it might be time to move to a new place. The appearance of new monsters worried him, but he did not live in those lands. At that moment, a noise interrupted his thoughts. Tsukasa returned to the village and noticed it felt livelier than usual. Near the gate, he nearly ran into a horse, which surprised him greatly. In the village, she notices many traders selling different goods, and a lively crowd lined up to buy them. Zozo happily notes that Tsukasa has returned. The hero asks if all these people are merchants, and Zozo confirms they are, explaining they sell goods that cannot be found in these lands. Scanning the merchants again, the character says he knew it. Now he walks around each trader and inspects their stalls, noticing that they are constantly moving from one place to another. Thinking about how traders leave one place and move to the next, he decides to join them so he can travel to other lands. Convinced this was the right choice, he decides the heavens favor him, and as if fate itself urges him on, he takes off from the spot. Running past Zozo, who does not understand where the hero is running, he gives Zozo the killed horned rabbit, then runs to a merchant and calls out, and the merchant responds to the cry. The hero steps up to a merchant girl and asks whether she is the boss here. The girl calls someone named Giselle. Giselle checks the goods in her carriage. Tsukasa says he meant to ask him something. The man asks what he could do for the hero. The merchant confirms the hero understood everything and says they will leave for another city in 2 days, asking whether the hero wants to join them, and the hero replies that he would if possible, with Giselle agreeing to take him with her. He asks Tsukasa if he could help guard their caravan on the way because someone like him would be reassuring, and the hero is surprised they already know about his hunting abilities. The character knows that at the fair people told each other everything they could, so the merchants learned about his abilities from the villagers, which was to be expected. Tsukasa says this work is no problem for him, and he will gladly help and protect the merchants on the road. Giselle likes the hero's mood and offers to seal their deal. The hero shakes hands in agreement. Tsukasa notices that handshakes are used in this world, and just then Zozo calls him, saying he heard Tsukasa's conversation with Giselle, and Tsukasa explains what he discussed. Zozo looks confused and tells the hero he believes he is leaving the village. The boy is confused about why he's leaving the village. Tsukasa is embarrassed and stays silent. He says there's no point in staying here, and it reminds him of a job he once quit in the real world. Zozo can't figure out why the hero fell into such a stupor after his questions. The character apologizes for not telling him right away and explains. He says he wants to see the world and become stronger. Zozo says that's cool, and though he's sad about the decision, he respects the hero's choice because it's his life and only he can decide what to do. He wishes the hero a safe journey. Tsukasa finds Zozo really cute and is very glad they became friends. The hero tells the village head, SD, about his decision. SD listens calmly and nods in understanding. This means the character is going to rustle, he says. Remembering how Esta always answered his questions without malice, Tsukasa now appreciates that Esta does not ask him about everything, and he apologizes for leaving after all the village chief has done for him. Estacombs calms him down and says the hero has already done a lot to help and save their village, so they are very grateful to him and are not angry with the character. Casa tells the herbalist Gerda he is leaving. She asks if he is really going, and the hero asks whether she is unhappy about it. The character now believes his apothecary specialization is the greatest debt he owes Gerda, even more than the Spartan training and exploitation, and he learned not to tell everyone about his skills. During the intense work, Grytis taught him more advanced specialist knowledge, and he finds Grytis's skills and knowledge enviable while still remembering their time working together. The hero realizes he cannot know how many years she spent piecing this knowledge together, but he believes gathering shared information is necessary when he uses his skills. Tsukasa knows, of course, that gathering information also includes the experiences Gord shared. The pharmacist says the hero seems unwilling to leave, and the hero objects. Gerda says they should teach him everything they can before he leaves for good. The hero doesn't understand why he has to go through all this. Traders enter the herbalist's shop, surprising the hero. Gertrude says Tsukasa doesn't have much time left. She tells the hero to get to work if necessary. Merchants leave herbs and other ingredients at Gertish's shop. At first the character thinks he doesn't have many tasks, but soon finds himself swamped with work and helps Gerda until his departure. On the morning of his departure, the hero bowed to all the residents, and they joyfully saw him off on his good journey, gathering at the main gate. Tsukasa is surprised at how many people came to say goodbye. Jazzle tells him it is not surprising because he is their savior. The villagers tell Tsukasa they hope to see him again and urge him to take care of himself. The hero heads to the carriage. Their shouts urged him to practice more and grow stronger, and the hero is pleased with their words. Giselle asks if he is ready. He agrees and says it's time to go, adding that staying longer will dull his senses, which is out of character for him. As the carriage sets off on its journey, Tsukasa feels glad this village was its starting point. Rustling and noise come from the forest, and the traders turn toward it, afraid. The hero says he knew they would appear. Merchants are puzzled about where the silver wolves came from and why there are monsters in this area. Kosa tells the driver to go as fast as possible and says he will handle the animals to slow them down and buy time while he prepares to cast spells. The hero realizes the silver wolves are targeting the carriage horses, which is exactly what he was counting on. Casting spells, he says it is time for the final task. Wolves chase the carriage but get caught in magical traps set by Tsukasa and take damage, though some of them keep chasing. The hero forms stone projectiles again and hurls them at the silver wolves, but one wolf dodges and circles the carriage toward the prized horses. Tsukasa leans out of the carriage and draws his bow while the merchants inside hold his leg tight to keep him from falling out. He releases the taut bowstring, and the bolt flies toward the charging animals. The arrow pierces the last wolf through and through, and it falls. The danger has passed. Giselle happily notes that the character drove off the pack. He says they'll stop the horses so he can collect his reward. Tsukasa refuses, saying it's not worth it. He decides he can't let the merchants linger here for long. For a small reward, the merchants don't insist. The carriage moves on. On hearing this, he is eager to see new lands as soon as possible and does not want to linger. He also looks forward to gaining more experience in new lands. The carriage moves beyond the horizon. A cart pulled by 2 horses moved along the road. Sitting beside barrels and sacks, the protagonist and the merchants talked, and one man cheerfully told Tsukasa he could sell many things, but Tsukasa said he did not want to. The coachman called out to the protagonist that he could see a city, and Tsukasa immediately leaned out of the carriage, smiling. The boy spotted Russell ahead, shouting the city's name. The cart approached the walled city. A long line formed at the city entrance. The hero watched the line with concern, saw the guards blocking the passage with spears checking people, and when a visitor showed them something he paused to think. Tsukasa realized he had no proof of his identity in this world, and pictured the guards seizing him and throwing him into the dungeon. The protagonist turned to Jaisel, the cheerful salesman. He asked whether anything had to be done to get in. Jaisel said yes. He told me I had to show the registration number and pay a fee. Kasa relaxed, realizing it was easy. A man suddenly noticed a group of people. They showed something to the guard and went through without paying. He informed the merchant about it. Jaisel explains they were registered with the Adventurers Guild, so they did not have to pay an entrance fee. The man showed the boy a document and said the merchants belonged to the guild too. Tsukasa was very surprised and thought paying every time would be a pain. When the guard asked the next person in line for his registration number, Tsukasa handed over a card, and the protagonist noticed it said specialization changer. Others always saw magician on his card, he thought. He had shown Gertis the past several times, but she still could not see the other inscription. The guard said it was rare to meet someone with a specialization, asked the protagonist if he wanted to become an adventurer, and got a yes. The guard greeted Tsukasa at the city gates and wished him luck. The merchants entered the city as the carriage moved down the road. Jaisel, sitting next to Tsukasa, asked if he wanted to join the guild. When Tsukasa said yes, Jaisel offered to accompany the boy so he would not get lost, and the boy thanked him. On the cart, Tsukasa decided his main goal was to master every profession and live comfortably, remembering he had wanted the same in another world, so he chose to kill monsters as the fastest way to get there. Suddenly, the boy thought freelancing would be wonderful, but in Japan it was looked down on, and he remembered the man who said working for yourself was the same as being unemployed. When the carriage stopped, Jaisel and Tsukasa got off. The man thanked the protagonist for his help and gave him a bag of gold, which the protagonist accepted. Tsukasa smiles, asked the merchants what they planned to do now. The men started unloading the goods, and Jaisel said eagerly that once they finished laying everything out they would begin trading, so when a surprised man offered a break, they replied that time was money. Tsukasa said he understood and wished the merchant good luck as he left. The boy shook Jaisel's hand firmly. Walking away from the carriage, the protagonist decided it was time to join the Adventurers Guild. Tsukasa walked through the crowd, clearly confused, among people of many different races. He looked around, surprised. Suddenly, the protagonist realized he was standing in front of a tall stone building, and that it was the guild building. Inside a large room were a reception desk, an order board, and tables, with several adventurers and a guild member present. The protagonist moved to the window and ran his finger along the sill to check its cleanliness, sensing a trusting atmosphere, but feeling slightly uneasy around the adventurers here. Tsukasa heard a guild member call to the next person. Smiling in her uniform, a girl greeted the newcomer to the guild and introduced herself as Louise, one of the employees. Tsukasa gave his name and asked to register. The girl pulled out some papers and asked him to pay 500 gold and show his registration number. Tsukasa turned away to look for what he needed. Louise glances at the protagonist's card. Tsukasa, holding a bag of money, confirmed he was a mage when she asked. Louise said there was no doubt about Tsukas's abilities and level, so they could continue with the registration. An employee eagerly pulled a small chest from under the counter. She asked him to insert the card into it and explained he would then receive a guild member card, and the main character, surprised, did as she instructed. Tsukasa raised his hands to shield himself from the bright light pouring from the chest as a new card formed out of thin air beside the old one, and the girl said everything was ready. 2 cards dropped from the chest. Standing at the counter with his eyes closed, the main character looked confused. He picked up a new card, looked at it, and asked what the adventurer rank was. Smiling, the employee explained that the guild had 7 ranks from S to F, and S was the highest and hard to reach. Tsukasa raised his hand and asked whether those people were high-ranking adventurers, and the girl named a dragon knight and a beast tamer as examples. Louise also remembered the holy knight Stefia, another guardian, and admired that the adventurer's skills were at S rank. Tsukasa clapped as he listened to the girl and made a mental note of how impressed he was by Louise's passion and thorough understanding of all aspects of the job. Tsukasa was confident. He understood that the method for promotion and attaining a high rank was kept secret. He decided to deal with it later. Now calm, she thanked him for his interest. Louise said the protagonist had just registered, so he could only take F-rank missions, but his specialization allowed him to take E-rank missions. The employee said assembling a squad makes more complex tasks available. The main character noticed a squad of 3 adventurers. She also said the guild advises against taking on tasks beyond the usual if someone isn't confident in their abilities, and that a person's rank can go up or down depending on task completion. Tsukasa regarded the guild as a recruitment agency that matched adventurers with clients and noted it would not allow anyone unfit to take a mission. The protagonist realized that a mismatch between skills and rank leads to demotion and mentally noted this was to be expected, seeing it as common in a capitalist society. He remembered a story about a colleague who had boasted to his boss, but after getting promoted couldn't handle the job and was demoted. Louise asked if Tsukasa had any questions. The man said he understood everything, bowed deeply, and thanked the employee, which surprised her greatly. The girl fell silent in shock. Tsukasa grew nervous and asked if everything was okay. She waved her hands and quickly said it was. Louis Pushley said the guy was very modest, which even surprised her. The guy was surprised that he had simply thanked her. A memory came back that this had happened before, and he tried to think of an unusual thing he could do. Watching the other adventurers, the boy realized specialists were much stronger, and those born that way felt superior and grew arrogant. Tsukasa decided he did not want to be like him. That made him wonder if the arrogance was a form of bragging. Louise called out to the thoughtful boy. The main character walked up to the task board where other adventurers were gathered. He decided not to take the assignments right away and instead just look them over for now. Accustomed to hunting monsters, gathering herbs, and cleaning, he was surprised to find an advert for a babysitter. He was surprised the guild offered assignments like that. Tsukasa saw many requests and decided to study the ad more closely. The note said an elderly elf needed help. The protagonist realized he hadn't even heard of assignments like that. Tsukasa saw the mission required an A rank and was shocked by the huge reward. The protagonist eagerly decided to take on the task. He liked that one advantage of working for himself was having space and plenty of opportunities to work. Tsukasa resolved to take on as many quests as possible starting the next day and focus on leveling up. Searching the city for the Tiger Cat Hotel J-Cell had mentioned, the protagonist finally saw a wooden sign with a cat's paw on it. The correct building stood before him. A man walked in and looked around, remembering J-Cell's recommendation that this place had wonderful employees. That made Tsukasa interested in the hotel. The adventurer remembered an acquaintance in Japan inviting him to a maid cafe, saying the staff were cute and it was discreet. The main character hated this place. Anger made him clench his fist as he remembered that incident. A voice snapped Tsukasa out of his memories. A little tabaxi in a dress with braids came up to him waving her paw. She said she was glad to see a guest. The man thought she was very cute and understood what Jazel meant. He asked to stay at the inn. The little girl agreed and said a night without food cost 600 gold pieces. The boy could come down to the hall if he wanted something to eat. Tsukasa said he wanted to book a room for a week, and the employee on the stairs paused and figured Tsukasa would have to pay 4,200. The girl asked the guest to write his name and said she would help if he could not write. Tsukasa wrote his name, said everything was fine, and was surprised that anyone might not be able to write. After reading his name in the notebook, the girl called him Mr. Tsukasa, and he told her to use his first name. Introducing herself as Nola, the little girl said she was glad to meet her. Tabaxi and the protagonist climbed the stairs. The girl held a key and said Jazel's recommendation meant Tsukasa would like the place. The man understood why the merchant was so excited about the inn. Nola opened the door and ran inside, spreading her arms to show the guest the small, modestly furnished room. Tsukasa found this place roomier than his home in Japan and much more comfortable. When Baxi called the room wonderful, she replied cheerfully that she washes and cleans it every day and added that no one would want a garbage dump instead of a room, and the man silently called the baby wonderful. Tsukasa realized cleanliness mattered to the beastmen because of their keen noses, and he suddenly thought of something and sniffed his shirt. During the week-long journey with the traders, he had rinsed a little, and now he worried he might smell. Casa asked the girl if there was a place in town to take a bath. Noel smiled and answered in the affirmative. Tsukasa stepped barefoot across the stone slabs and into the large public bathhouse. Surveying the large hall, the protagonist admired how much larger it was than he had expected and estimated it could hold 50 or even 100 people. A dragonborn came up behind him. The protagonist immediately noticed the reptilian walking past and lowering himself into the bath. Tsukasa watched the humanoid, lying relaxed in the water and standing in the dwarves' bath, and was surprised by how many different baths there were for other races. Smiling, the protagonist found a public bath in another world very amusing and immediately decided to behave more decently. Tsukasa also spotted tiny bathtubs for the little pixies, where the creatures splashed around. The boy found the shampoo and noticed its odd color. Watching the dwarf and tabaxi use it, he wondered if humans could use it. The protagonist learned that the shampoo made from milky fluids had a pleasant scent and left the hair soft, and that the body soap made from the fruits of the vashirana left the skin soft and smooth. Tsukasa decided to use it despite its unusual composition. Pouring the shampoo into his hand, he decided not to dwell on the name, assuming it was named after some cute creature. Lathering his head, the man noticed a pleasant floral scent. It made him think the shampoo was clearly not for men. Tsukasa tried to enter the bathhouse, but pulled his foot back when he felt the water was too hot. He realized that even if he wanted to make it hotter, he couldn't because the muscular man in the bathhouse had turned off the tap. Tsukasa decided that even as a newcomer, he should follow what everyone else was doing. Confidently, the protagonist entered the bathhouse. The man stood beside the stranger, suffering from a high fever. Sitting in the bath with another man, the protagonist felt how hot it was, flushed red, and the stranger glanced at him with a grin. Tsukasa saw the stranger watching him. Silently, the man pointed at the button, and the protagonist wondered what kind it was. Something pressed it, and water poured down on the surprised man, who realized it was the shower button. Shocked, Tsukasa felt the magical power while standing under the shower and thought the bath water was heated by that magic, and that this was a special skill. Standing with a confused look, the man noticed the stranger's stern gaze and immediately smiled, which pleased the stranger. The happy protagonist and the content stranger sat under the shower spray. The man thought about how comfortable life in this world was. Tsukasa felt wonderful. The bath was so pleasant he realized he should have done it from the start, and the hot water took away all his fatigue. At the other baths, the boy saw visitors enjoying themselves, and the adventurer realized that public baths are the most comfortable place even in other worlds. Tsukasa stood up confidently, sure he was ready for tomorrow's adventure. Suddenly, a relaxed reptile in the bathhouse caught his eye, and he realized it was a hot tub. Splashing water, the adventurer hurried over and pressed the button to turn on the hydro massage. A strong rush of water knocked Tsukasa off his feet. A sign on the wall said these baths were for reptilians. The humanoid looked at the man who had fallen into the water, confused. That morning, Tsukasa went down to the hotel hall. Nola greeted the protagonist warmly and asked if he had slept well. Tsukasa stretched, thanked the tabaxi, and said he had slept well. She asked him what he wanted for breakfast. When he didn't answer, she suggested their signature steak. Tsukasa agreed and said he wanted to try it. Nola handed the order to her father. The lion-like humanoid cutting meat took the order. The tabaxi woman holding the salad looked at the girl. Lev cooked a steak, and the girl served it to Tsukasa while apologizing for its weight. A man watched her as she walked away carrying several trays at once, and the protagonist was surprised by her strength. Tsukasa, the adventurer, decided to try the steak even though it was still hot. When he brought the fork to his mouth, he noticed a lot of fat. After eating a piece, he was surprised the meat had no unpleasant smell. The main character smiled, surprised that he had never imagined eating steak for breakfast. He remembered how he had ordered it at a place in Japan. A voice pulled him out of his thoughts. An annoying customer demanded Nola bring his order right away, insisting his time was worth more than a typical adventurer's. The baby's father silently took a sword in each hand and walked into the hall toward the insolent man. Frightened, the baby clung to Sux's shoulders, screaming. Arriving at the guild, the main character was stunned and confused. Standing just around the corner, the boy watched a chaotic brawl of adventurers ripping task sheets from each other's hands. Louise stayed calm. Seeing the protagonist, she greeted him as she always did. Frightened, he asked her what was happening. Louise said the guild was packed because the quests went up early that morning. The protagonist asked whether that explained the fight and pointed to two adventurers fighting. Louise smiled and said this was a common occurrence, while behind her shoulder 2 adventurers and animal skins fought. The girl approached the men, reminded them they could be demoted, and they calmed down and apologized. Upset by the sight of the fighters, the protagonist realized he would have to get through them, but then Louise unfolded a sheet of assignments in front of him and said he could look at the assignments here too. Tsukasa immediately focused on collecting Dazul herbs. When he told the girl he would take the task, she was very happy and said she would draw up the necessary documents. The adventurer was surprised by her reaction. He suggested they were short on medicinal herbs. She confirmed that and said Dazul herbs were hard to find, then asked whether he could tell from her face. The employee said this is exactly why the guild offers a large reward for this task. The boy eagerly promised to gather as many herbs as he could. Louise said he would be a great help to the guild. The other guild members praised him as a good fellow. Tsukasa reached for the basket, but Louise stopped him, saying that despite his specialization, he should put his safety first because he only became an adventurer recently. The man smiled in agreement and told himself that listening to others is an important skill. Seeing Louise's joyful expression, Tsukasa decided to try his apothecary skills in action and show others what he could do. Leaving the guild, the protagonist decided he needed to gather a long list of completed tasks to earn more money later. Louise smiled and waved after him. Tsukasa walked through the forest with a basket strapped to his back. He remembered that the Dazul grass grows in the shallower parts of the forest. Under a tree, he spotted the right plant. The protagonist figured he'd get 15 gold per plant and needed to collect 10 to finish the task, plus a 200 gold reward for completing it, which would cover a night at the inn. A sudden frown crossed the boy's face as he glared at the torn plant. Finishing the task would take a long time, he thought. Tsukasa decided it was time to switch his specialization to apothecary, remembering the profession grants a special skill to boost healing effects and prepare potions. Tsukasa remembered that the herb-gathering skill unlocks at level 10 of this specialization. The protagonist switched professions. After the adventurer changed specialization, the Dizula herb glowed red, making it easy to tell it apart from the fake herbs mixed in with the real ones. The protagonist started gathering herbs, searching behind rocks and trees, and felt disappointed that the skill could not identify herbs that had already been picked. Tsukasa still knew that because of this ability he could easily finish the task. Kneeling in the middle of the field, he happily placed the gathered plants into the basket. At the guild, Louise greeted the protagonist and asked if he had managed to collect the herbs, and the man with a basket of herbs on his back said he had. Approaching, he set the bags of plants down in front of the girl. The employee's mouth fell open in surprise. He said he'd collected about 200 herbs, which shocked Louise and the rest of the staff, and the girl repeated the number, afraid. The protagonist asked the staff to inspect the herbs. After they checked the plants, Louis confirmed they were all Dazula herbs and that there were 206. One staff member wiped sweat from his forehead. Louis eyed the protagonist with suspicion and asked Tsukasa how he had gathered the herbs so quickly, since Tsukasa is a magician, not an apothecary. The boy realized the guild workers would suspect something was wrong. Tsukasa said he had been trained by an experienced pharmacist, Gerda, which explained his high level of skill, and Louise accepted this as reasonable. The employee apologized for her behavior and confirmed that Tsukasa had collected the herbs needed to complete the task, and she asked whether he wanted to sell the remaining 196 plants. The protagonist agreed, received 10,300 gold for collecting herbs, and remembered the mentor he had once cursed, now realizing her difficult tasks had been good for him. Realizing there was still time, he assigned 2 herb-collecting tasks to Kirk and Svale in front of the employees. Stunned, the guild members stood with their mouths open. Louise asked whether Tsukasa planned to collect the same number of these plants. Tsukasa replied enthusiastically that the herbs were essential. The staff were scared by the upcoming plant count. The adventurer returned to the guild with large bags of herbs on his back. Guild workers were exhausted from counting the herbs. Louise assigned Tsukasa a new task, surprising him. The man hesitated, remembering he had said there is usually data collection before an execution, and Louise slapped the table as she pushed 2 assignments in front of the main character. The employee said the man was crazy. She said she had never heard of an adventurer collecting hundreds of herbs in one day. Tsukasa asked if the shortage of medicinal plants had been fixed and admitted he enjoyed the leisurely herb-gathering quests but had become too fixated on them. Louise said the problem was solved thanks to Tsukasa. To the puzzled boy, she explained he did not seem like an ordinary adventure. Louise said confidently that the guild would not want to waste such talent and suggested the boy take a rank-up quest, adding it would likely be no problem for him. Stunned, the man slammed the table. Tsukasa told Louise with enthusiasm that he would take the task, which startled the employee. The main character realized this was the long-awaited growth. Aiming to destroy all the monsters, he clenched his fist and looked up. Tsukasa turned to the employee and asked what he needed to do. Louise, realizing her part, pushed the job of eliminating the kobolds and boars onto him. He said he would take both assignments, which greatly surprised her. Smiling, the employee said that for a mage like Tsukasa this was no problem. The girl then asked the protagonist to be careful. Louis sealed both assignments. Walking through the forest, Tsukasa reflected on how he had already encountered mysterious beasts and monsters in this world, and had subdued many of them. He began to think he might already have gone beyond the limits of a typical adventurer. Kobolds and boars felt like ordinary monsters, and he wondered which one he would meet first. The man suddenly sat down on one knee and began to gather herbs with a smile. Snapping out of it, he stared at the plant in his hand, shocked. Tsukasa told him he had been too focused on collecting herbs. The adventurer stood up and said it was out of habit. He decided to focus, since today was a crucial day and monsters could appear at any moment. A red boar caught Tsukasa's eye. The beast charged the main character. The god unleashed a magical blast at the animal to repel its attack. When the boar fell, the man felt very happy. The adventurer immediately saw an icon showing a piece of meat and looked bewildered. Two more furious boars charged out of the bushes on either side of Tsukasa, roaring. With a single spell, the protagonist defeated them as rocks burst from the ground. The animals were thrown into the air. The main character snapped off the boar's tusks in a single move. He felt pleased that he had won and even had a scratch from the fight. Tsukasa realized that using magic improved his wizard abilities, but he also saw his progress was unbalanced. The adventurer decided his advantage was adapting flexibly to different specializations and realized the more skills he had, the better. Tsukasa tried out other skills on the kobolds. The protagonist found a kobold encampment. The man spotted a dog-like beastman carrying homemade spears. After switching his specialization to a thief, Tsukasa rushed at the monsters at high speed and used his steal ability to snatch a weapon from one of them. Kobold froze in shock and fear when he realized the spear he had been holding just a second earlier had suddenly disappeared. Tsukasa quickly switched jobs to become a spearman. He swung his new weapon in a wide arc. The blow struck the kobold's face, knocking it to the ground. The other monster, spear in hand, recoiled in fear. Relieved, the main character clutched the weapon in trembling hands, glad he had succeeded. Another monster charged at the man with a roar, but the main character twisted his spear and repelled the attack. A powerful swing of his spear knocked the enemy back. From the corner of his eye, Tsukasa saw the other kobold raise his weapon to attack him. Striking first, the protagonist landed a quick spear blow that sent the monster aside. Kasaswangi turned forward again, swung his spear wide, and knocked another monster off its feet. Tsukasa raised the spear behind his head with both hands, standing over his prone opponent. A single, precise blow to the chest killed the creature. Relieved, the main character looked at the defeated kobolds and felt the tasks were finished. Tsukasa returned to the guild and showed the trophies to the staff, and Louise congratulated him on completing the task and told him he had been promoted to E rank. The protagonist thanked the girl, who leaned over the counter and said he was incredible, adding that he was the first person to rise so quickly in the Adventurers Guild. He tried to tell the employee it came down to his specialization, but she cut him off and said other adventurers needed at least 10 days to advance. Seeing the employee's enthusiasm, the protagonist thought this was an impressive achievement for the guild. He said he would keep working hard to earn a D rank, and the Wheeze admired his modesty. The protagonist decided with confidence that he would reach S rank. Louis warned that the number of extra tasks would rise and advised keeping healing and recovery potions on hand. Tsakasa's enthusiasm faded as he eyed the girl and realized Louise had casually mentioned something important. The protagonist believed that potions were made by alchemists. Though he could make them himself, the boy wanted to see how others did it. He asked Louise where to buy potions. She showed him where the shop was and said its manager was an alchemist. Tsukasa walked out of the guild building and headed in the indicated direction, excited to meet someone with a specialization for the first time. Realizing he needed stronger connections for future gain, the protagonist remembered Louise's hesitant answer that left him uneasy. Walking around the city, the protagonist remembered how hard it was to negotiate with specialists, assumed it was because of their difficult personalities, and hoped he would get by without any trouble. When Casa reached the spot Louise had pointed out, he was shocked by what he saw. A frozen adventurer stood before a massive, luxurious building. Tsukasa stepped into a magnificent, glittering potion shop. The main character stared at the potion racks, amazed by the lavish display all around. It felt like he had stepped into a jewelry shop. Leaning in, he began looking at the selection. He searched for healing potions. He saw potions for agility, mana restoration, and breathing underwater. The protagonist soon found what he was looking for. A display case held 3 ranks of healing potions. Weak potions healed minor wounds, medium potions fused broken bones, and strong potions restored lost limbs. Realizing higher ranks meant more effective remedies, the boy fell into gloom over his lost limbs. Tsukasa checked the prices and was surprised he would have to pay 100 gold pieces for a weak potion. Shocked, the boy clutched his small bag of money, remembered he had earned only 14 gold coins from collecting herbs, and thought indignantly that for that amount the potions were guaranteed to work. Suddenly an alchemist appeared behind the main character and asked the buyer if he liked the goods, startling the buyer and causing him to scream. A short, elderly man in fine clothes stepped in front of the main character, his face showing displeasure. The man said the seller had frightened him. Tsukasa apologized with a smile and politely explained that he was E-rank and that the store's prices had surprised him a little. The alchemist snorted and irritably called the protagonist a low-ranking adventurer. The man explained the price of his goods was high because the raw materials cost a lot and because he gathered the herbs himself and had studied alchemy for years. Tsukasa looked at the potions in disbelief. After estimating the cost of a weak healing potion, the protagonist realized it should be about 2,000 golds, far less than the stated price. The alchemist began talking about himself and his family. Tsukasa, lost in thought and not listening, realized alchemists charged high prices for their services. Adventurers still need to be treated somehow. While the seller kept talking, the protagonist remembered he had once worked as a merchant. Lost in memories, Tsukasa remembered his boss saying he could set his own prices no matter the cost. The alchemist kept talking about himself. Realizing the cost of raw materials didn't matter, the protagonist saw that the alchemist's skills mattered most and were worth their weight in gold, and the alchemist was indignant that Tsukasa ignored him. The boy believed he had alchemical skills and smiled broadly at the seller. The protagonist left the store quickly, saying goodbye, while the salesman angrily told him not to come back. While walking through the city, the adventurer eagerly decided to prepare the potion. Tsukasa walked through the crowded market, buying all the needed ingredients and bottles. Standing before the equipment laid out on the table, he said he had also picked up a couple of gadgets at the hardware store. Tsukasa switched his specialization to alchemy. First, the man decided to make magic water. He poured ordinary water into the pan and then used telekinesis to lift it gently above the table. The adventurer poured his magic into the water. A fireball formed at his command. Startled, it began heating the water. The liquid in the pan began to sparkle, and the protagonist decided that the magic water was ready. Wiping sweat from his forehead, the main character decided to work with the extractor on the table while the water in the jugs cooled. Carefully, he tore 10 leaves from both the blackbird grass and the common grass, placed them in a round flask, and crushed them with a spell. After finishing, Tsukasa conjured another fireball to heat the leaves, and the liquid began to bubble. The protagonist stands with his hand outstretched, intently watching the extractor as he casts a spell to draw the healing ingredients from the mixture. Next, he secured the components. Arms folded across his chest, the frowning man watched the jar fill drop by drop, then closed the lid. The potion was ready. Tsukasa realized that selling more potions would earn him more experience points. Eager to earn more experience points, Tsukasa kept making more potions. Day turns into night tonight. That morning, Tsukasa leaned out the window, opened the shutters, and saw it was already light outside. Realizing he'd been so absorbed in his potions that he hadn't noticed the morning arrive, the boy by the window turned and looked at the 2 boxes of potions he'd prepared. Tsukasa figured a potion cost 2,000 golds, added the alchemist's markup to see how much he would earn, and imagining mountains of gold coins, he felt very happy. The adventurer decided to sell these potions today. The boy started putting the bottles into his bag. Tsukasa decided it was best to sell them quickly, since potions, like food, have an expiration date. A man slung a bag of potions over his shoulder. The protagonist stepped outside and said goodbye to Nola as she swept the floor. It bothered him that no one knew about him, so people would not want to buy his potions. The adventurer entered the city and headed to the right place. Tsukasa remembered finding a place yesterday that could help him solve his problem, and when he stopped at the right store, he looked up. It was called Liesel's store. A sign below said this place had its own appraiser. The adventurer figured the shop's appraiser would want to buy his potions if he saw them. The adventurer slapped his potion bag and opened the door. The bell above the lintel rang. A boy stepped into the potion shop alone, and the bored elf behind the counter greeted him without enthusiasm. She gave him a bored look. The protagonist scanned the empty store and mentally noted there were few customers. Casa approached the counter, handed the girl his bag, and said he wanted to offer his goods to her, and the elf immediately perked up and stood up. She opened her bag, pulled out the bottle, and her delight quickly faded into disappointment and boredom. The girl asked the protagonist if he had seen the sign outside. She angrily told him not to waste her time or bring pathetic fakes. Tsukasa insisted they were real potions, but the appraiser told him not to lie, said he was not a mage, and the elf added that his stats were good but his level and rank were lacking. Leaning over with her hands on her hips, the girl studied the visitor as a glow appeared beside the elf, and she said the man could not make a healing potion. Tsukasa caught her gaze and realized she had used evaluation magic on him, so he handed the confused girl a potion and asked her to test at least one first. Bewildered, the elf stared at the bottle, squeezed the jar, and said in disbelief that it was a top-quality potion. The girl apologized for accusing the guy. Tsukasa reminded her he wanted to sell the potions, and the appraiser said sadly she would be willing to buy them but did not have enough money, adding that the average price of a potion was at least 100,000 golas. The protagonist happily said he would lower the price to $80,000. The surprised saleswoman objected that it was pointless and that elsewhere he would get a much higher price for these potions. Tsukasa smiled and replied that he would rather work with a store that had its own appraiser. The saleswoman eyed the man suspiciously, hand on her hip and grinning, and said he was willing to sell the potions cheaply so he would not reveal where he got them. The saleswoman and the adventurer shook hands. Liesel introduced herself and said she was happy to work together. Casa felt pleased with the deal he'd just made, and seeing the girl squeeze his hand tightly, he was confident he'd work well with this elf. Lisa put up a sign saying the shop sold high-quality healing potions, mentioned she was displaying Tsukasa's goods, and invited him to bring any other potions to sell. Tell Casa that he had just made another 50 mana recovery potions. Covering her face with her hands, the girl asked in shock how much she had prepared. Excited, the elf said she would strike it rich with Tsukasa's help, raised her clenched fists, and told him to bring all the potions here, and added that she wanted to sell all the goods the guy brought as soon as possible. The protagonist said the only thing left was to wait for customers. Liesel offered him the chair behind the counter, and he sat down. The protagonist recalled selling potions for 800,000 goals. Pleased, he and Liesel shook hands. Tsukasa walked through the city. After selling his potions, Tsukasa went to check out a weapon shop. The adventurer believed that working as an alchemist would let him live comfortably for the rest of his life. Tsukasa realized the world is fickle, and his potions would one day be useless, so he imagined his boss saying he hadn't seen any alchemists in a long time and knew he needed another source of income. The adventurer spotted a large stone building with a sign that read Doran's armory. The man opened the door and saw a huge room in front of him, with various weapons lining the walls. Surprised, Tsukasa walked inside and saw that weapons in this world raised stats and required a minimum level to equip. The adventurer noted that, for example, his iron sword needs no equipment level. He considered upgrading his sword but decided his staff was enough. Believing he changed jobs often, he could use both staffs and swords. A sudden thought froze him, and he nervously wondered how much permanent equipment he would need in that case. When Casa realized his 800,000 would not be enough to buy equipment for each of his 20 jobs, he was shocked and frightened and knew he was not rich but a beggar. The protagonist told himself he probably didn't have to buy equipment for all 20 professions at once, wondered how he'd wear it all, and let out a tired sigh. The adventurer peered into one of the halls, saw a blacksmith forging a blade, and called to him. The seller, a bald, bearded dwarf, removed his mask and stepped toward him. A man watching the main character with a sullen look called him a strange boy. Tsukasa asked why he said that. The salesman said he had worked in a forge his whole life and could tell at once what weapon a customer used. Tsukasa fought with both sword and staff and had a strange aura. The dwarf asked if his client had any specific requests. Tsukasa said the weapon should let him use magic. The blacksmith then asked what kind of weapon he wanted. Claiming he could handle a short sword, a staff, and a dagger, the man prompted a suspicious question from the dwarf, who asked how he could wield so many weapons, but said he'd sell anything if the client had the money. Tsukasa told the leaving blacksmith that the spear would suit him too, and the blacksmith again called his client a mysterious boy as he walked away. Seeing the dwarf's many weapons, Tsukasa realized he could not carry them all on his person and decided to leave them in the living room and pick a specific weapon for each situation. With sadness, the protagonist said he wanted to get some inventory, and the seller replied that such things exist. Kasa perked up and asked if it was true. The dwarf said high-ranking adventurers were buying them at auction. The blacksmith said the inventory's starting price was 10 million gold, which upset Tsukasa. The protagonist replied sadly that he would do without the inventory. Tsukasa thought he would not even be able to participate in the auction. After examining his client, the blacksmith realized the man still needed to buy armor. Tsukasa examined the armor in the hall. The seller said better equipment would be available at level 10 and advised buying the armor early. Tsukasa agreed that the seller was right. Smiling, he looked toward the seller and did not understand why they were staring at him. The protagonist thought that, despite the blacksmith's gruff, dwarf-like appearance, he cared about his customers. The adventurer slid his sword into its sheath. Leaving the shop, Tsukasa realized he needed to level up to wear better armor. A group of armed men were watching him. Tsukasa froze, puzzled by the way they looked at him. Someone stepped out of the crowd and asked Tsukasa if he was the new guy who had risen quickly through the ranks. Tsukasa confirmed it and asked what was wrong. They said he was doing well, and Tsukasa thanked them. The protagonist stood in the guild studying the task board and thought that reaching rank E would bring more tasks. He said with enthusiasm that one task would be enough to raise his level. Tsukasa handed Louise the quest sheet and asked to take it. The task was to kill 20 goblins, and Louise agreed, saying the adventure was now an E-rank quest. When the employee asked if he'd managed to brew the potions, the protagonist said yes, explaining a miracle had helped him and that alchemy was an amazing profession. Louise said sadly that many people have to work the same job their whole lives, then told Tsukasa she was happy for him, and he admitted that working the front desk day in and day out was not easy. He thought how glad he was to meet someone as pleasant as Liesel. The young elf's enthusiasm stayed with him. After sealing the assignment, Louise happily wished the protagonist good luck with the task. With a single swing of his sword, Tsukasa took care of the goblin. More monsters rushed at him, screaming. He swung and knocked two aside. The third opponent blocked the attack with a baton. After neutralizing the enemy, Tsukasa broke his weapon. Noting with pleasure, he realized he was moving with unusual ease. The new equipment was to blame, he decided. Opening the status window, the protagonist checked whether he had reached level 10. Kasa remembered unlocking new skills when he leveled up the pharmacist job and wondered what he would gain from leveling up the job change skill. Takasa decided to get something useful. The status window showed a pocket inventory was available at this level to store the equipment or tools needed for any profession. He was surprised he could get such a useful item at level 10. When he tried to move the trophy to his inventory, a message suddenly appeared across the status window. The screen said Tsukasa hadn't met the conditions to get the pocket inventory. The man was furious. A new message said he first had to raise 5 jobs to level 10. Tsukasa thought he had only raised the pharmacist's profession to level 10, believed he still had 4 professions left to level 10, and realized it would be easy. Tsukasa decided to raise their level, using goblins that were rapidly multiplying and scaring people nearby. He handled the 20th goblin. Notifications showed the night job had reached level 5, and Tsukasa had completed the quest, but he kept hunting monsters because he still hadn't unlocked the conditions to access the inventory. As the adventurer jumped from one branch to another and sat in the tree, the protagonist suddenly noticed many monsters. Kobolds and goblins appeared before him. Tsukasa realized the monsters were starting to fight each other. He was glad that so many monsters had gathered in one place. Roaring, the monsters charged at one another. They began fighting while the man hid behind a rock. Tsukasa ran out from behind it and became a magician. The adventurer ran toward the fighting monsters who had noticed him. After stopping, he cast a spell on them with his staff. Frozen, the creatures were trapped in the blade's massive vortex. Standing next to the whirlwind that was quickly destroying the monsters, he cast a spell. The protagonist decided goblins and kobolds did not yield useful materials, and he had no time for them. The status window showed 2 professions at level 10 out of 5, pharmacist and mage. Crouching, Tsukasa thought following the goblins' tracks would lead him to their nest, remembering the E-rank mission to destroy the lair of these monsters. The adventurer knew that to level up, he had to finish this task. Tsukasa walked out to the goblin lair, sat in a tree watching the entrance, and thought finishing the task would let him level up and raise his rank. As a thief, Tsukasa could handle the goblin from a distance. The adventurer peered into the cave and saw it was dark and narrow. swordsman skills would not help, and he was already at a high enough level as a magician. The walking goblins feared the main character, who quickly took care of them. He activated the thief's passive skill night vision. Tsukasa then decided to improve that profession in the cave. Attacking monsters, the adventurer realized each new level boosted his stats and gave him a huge advantage over those with only one profession. He took care of the goblins. Tsukasa felt more like an assassin than a thief and wanted to master that profession in the future. Deeper into the cave, the adventurer saw a high goblin seated on a throne and thought how arrogant the creature was. He recalled they were far stronger than normal goblins, so he could die if he wasn't careful. Tsukasa resolved to give it his all as he charged. He used telekinesis to attack the goblin, while the adventurer quickly dealt with the monsters. A massive goblin growled as more creatures rushed at Tsukasa, who realized the monster had called for reinforcements. Although the new opponents were stronger, the main character was much faster. A fiery funnel appeared suddenly. Tsukasa dodged it, but several goblins did not. The adventurer realized the huge goblin had no equals, not even among its own kind, and that the world of monsters was full of evil creatures. The adventurer switched professions and decided to deal with the shaman first. Spotting him, the monster fired another fireball. Tsukasa resisted his spell and unleashed shockwave, making the shaman scream. One swing ended his adventure. Furious, the high goblin gripped his sword tightly. A huge goblin approached Tsukasa from behind, its heavy sword raised. The monster lowered its weapon, and the main character jumped back to dodge the blow. The goblin swung his weapon, and the adventurer dodged once more. Tsukasa cast Windstream. Tears welled in the monster's eyes, and he paused as the protagonist prepared to strike. The protagonist's sword failed to harm the monster because its skin was too thick, leaving Kasa confused. The goblin swung again, and the boy cast the shockwave spell once more. Wounded, the monster dropped his sword, doubled over, and screamed. Casting the flash spell, the adventurer defeated the huge goblin. Pleased with the rapid leveling, he had the swordsman profession at level 7 and the thief profession at level 10, raised the master of professions skill to level 2, and Tsukasa reached level 4. The adventurer realized this was the strongest opponent he had ever faced and that he had learned a lot because of him. Suddenly, Tsukasa saw the high goblin's chest glowing. He remembered that some monsters occasionally have magic stones embedded in them. Sprinting toward the monster, he pulled out the magic stone. A system message said this item held a creature's power and could be used to make weapons, magic items, and other equipment. Tsukasa felt lucky. The main character figured he only had to level up the warrior and spearman professions, and today the pocket inventory would be his. 2 notifications arrived for the adventurer. One said he had reached level 10 as a spearman and level 12 as a job changer, and the other said he had met the conditions and received a pocket inventory. Tsukasa was thrilled by the new item when a small floating chest appeared in front of him. The main character looked at his belongings, of which he now had many. Tsukasa activated the transfer to storage, and the items disappeared. The list that appeared confirmed they were now in his inventory, and he raised his hands to the sky, feeling blissful. Kas returned to the guild that night. Louise noticed he was late. Busy leveling up, the adventurer replied. The girl noticed he had fought many monsters today. While cataloging the trophies, the attendant was surprised to find a high goblin's magic stone and a goblin shaman's trophy among them. Tsukasa said he got them by destroying a goblin nest. Confused, the employee asked the man if he had dealt with an entire nest of goblins on his own. The adventurer asked eagerly if this was enough to earn a new rank, but the girl said it was not that simple. The girl said enthusiastically that handling D-rank monsters alone was still a great achievement. Louise said Tsukasa clearly had abilities above rank E and was cheating the ranking system. The other staff called it a serious crime. Tsukasa replied that it sounded rude. The girl advised the adventurer to make sure his rank matched his true strength.